please unmute yourself. Huh?
Yay!
Yes. Please save all your questions for the end of the class, and you can unmute yourself. 1 second.
Recording даже.
А?
Даже можно записать.
Yeah, I like it like this, because then you can see more than one person.
So, sounds okay.
Okay.
1 second. Just
There, you're there. Why is there no picture?
all right, everyone is muted. I'm going to join you with the rabbi in a few seconds. And it's also live on Facebook. Emma, do you see it on Facebook?
Yeah, let's start.
All right.
It is live on Facebook, yes.
Okay, it's live on Facebook.
Hello,
And
good
we
evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm sorry for the delay. We had a little delay, a little glitch on the computer, but we are good now. So we are tonight going to spend some time together in preparation for the Seder, which is coming up a week from tonight. Next week, Wednesday night, we're going to celebrate the experience and known as the Seder Passover celebration. So I'm going to go through tonight with you the Seder step by step. Just to mention that the reason we are doing it is especially, and I'm doing it with joining all together in prayer for all those who are in this Pesach are going to be separated from their regular community, public Seders, community Seder celebrations, family celebrations. Unfortunately, we are in a difficult time, a situation, but we believe and have hope and trust in God that very soon, and hopefully even before Pesach, we reunited together as a family, as a community, and even better, let us all be together with Mashiach Tzidkenu in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, in celebrate Pesach, in the real, original, biblical way, the way it's required, in the way it will be and it should be, God willing, this year in 2020. But for now, we have to get ready and we have to be prepared. And therefore, we are here tonight, and if those who can take a pencil or a pen or a computer and write down some notes if you need, in order to make sure that you have the step-by-step Seder properly, and you are able to have the most meaningful and inspiring Seder the way it should be. The first part, which we spoke in the previous week about removing the chametz, I'm sure you all know what to take care of to get rid of the chametz. And especially I want to remind you all to sell whatever chametz you're still going to keep in your possession, in your domain. You want to make sure that this is not owned by you or by any other Jewish person. This is the traditional practice of selling the chametz. You can appoint a rabbi to sell it for you. Here, you can do it at the website. If you go to our website at chabadbellevue.org or any other Chabad website, you should find the opportunity for appointing a rabbi to serve as an agent for you in order to sell the chametz, so you wouldn't own any chametz. Very strictly by the Torah, is the prohibition to own chametz that belongs to a Jew,
and I'm encouraging you all to take care of it. You don't need to meet the rabbi in present, especially this year that we are keeping to social distance. So you want to make sure, even to the website, that your chametz is being sold before next week, Tuesday. And now regarding the Seder. The Seder of Pesach is called with the title Seder. Seder means order, because this is a celebration which requires a certain order in order to be able to experience it properly. It's a very holy night. The spiritual gains which we can receive on the night of Pesach is not comparable to any other celebration or even to any other holiday. This is the night that we all became a people. Lokachas legoy mikerev goy, the prophet says, we were taken as a nation from among nations. This is perhaps the birthday of the Jewish people. And now, for this year, we are experiencing 3,332 years from the night that we celebrated the first time Pesach, still in the land of Egypt. It was only the next morning that we left. Later, coming into the land of Israel, 40 years after leaving Egypt, the first experience in Israel as a nation in our own homeland, led by Yoshua ben Nun, by Joshua, the one who was the leader right after the passing of Moses, coming into the land. The first holiday in the first days coming into the land of Israel was again the holiday of Pesach. And from then on, Pesach was always a celebration which was kept by our families and communities. And the tradition of Pesach is so that one generation transmitted the message to the next generation, as the Torah specifically tells us, Veigadeto lebincha bayom hahu, that the message of freedom of Pesach is to be related to our children, which is mainly to the next generation and to the generation to the next generation, to always remember that we are free. Every person contains a quality of freedom. It was granted to us at the day of Pesach, and from then on, no circumstances can ever take away that ability to experience and to enjoy, and we are celebrating that tremendous freedom. I'm especially referring to those who might find themselves alone this Pesach due to the requirements of quarantine and social distance and to protect our health. My dear friends, we are not alone. No Jew is ever alone. God is with us in our Seders, is going to be with you, is going to be with us. That is going to be probably a Seder that you had never experienced before physically, but spiritually it's going to be a very uplifting Seder. And this is going to give you strength and courage for the coming year after Pesach with good health, to be able to enjoy a beautiful spring and summer with good health. This is how we look forward and how we are expecting this Pesach to be. So let's start with the Seder. And it's not Pesach tonight, it's a week before, but we're going to go through step by step. In order to do the Pesach Seder properly, you first need to have a number of items that you must prepare now, this week, before next week, Wednesday night. And what are the items which is a must on the Seder? Is first of all, you are going to get matzah. And let me explain for a moment the matzah. The matzah, as you see over here, this is a box of matzah, which this matzah is called handmade shmura matzah. And I'm encouraging you all to get a hold of some shmura matzah. The reason why it's called shmura matzah, shmura in Hebrew means guarded. This matzah, the Torah wants us to guard the matzah from becoming chametz, from becoming leaven, and guard it for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvah of eating matzah during the night of Pesach. Biblically, the guarding of the matzah starts when the flour comes together with the water by kneading the dough. But nevertheless, they just introduced all kinds of stringencies in order to beautify the mitzvah and the special mitzvah of matzah. So we are offering this shmura matzah, which means that the guarding did not only start by the kneading of the dough, not even when the wheat was grounded into flour, but at the moment the wheat were removed and they were cut in the fields, from that moment on, we made sure that this wheat is not coming in contact with water at all. And that's what it's called shmura, from the time of ktsira, from the time of cutting the wheat. It's made by people by hand, especially so the people who make it, can have the proper intention, and they can even verbalize and declare by their mouth that this is made l'shem matzah's mitzvah, for the sake of the mitzvah of matzah, and to fulfill the mitzvah to eat matzah by our people during the night of Pesach.
I think you'd be fresh.
That's especially the purpose and the reason by encouraging you to use man-made hand matzah called matzah shmura. But at the same time, if you don't yet get handmade shmura matzah, you should be able to use any kosher lePesach matzah for the Seder. So what you want to have is matzah. The number two, what you want to have with you is a bottle of wine or even a bottle of grape juice for those who can't drink wine. The wine should be kosher for Passover and kosher in general, and obviously kosher for Passover too. The reason we are going to have wine is, as we're going to go over soon, we have a rabbinic obligation. A part of the Seder is to drink 4 cups of wine. The matzah that we mentioned before is a biblical commandment to eat matzah the night of Passover. In addition, there's another commandment to drink 4 cups of wine, but don't just drink 4 cups of wine, but rather you drink it to a Seder. What Seder means what? Order. There's a special order how you're going to be drink those 4 cups, as we're going to go through in a moment. In addition to the matzah and the wine, the Seder is ran with a special program organized by a Seder plate. And the Seder plate is going to contain the bitter herbs, which we're going to fulfill the mitzvah of eating maror, bitter herbs, to remember the bitterness in the enslavement that we experienced while being in Egypt. In addition, we are going to have on that plate a piece of meat called the zroya, to remember that during temple times, the night of Passover, we all were obligated to eat a special piece of meat which was offered in the temple, Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb, which was given to us on the first Passover celebrated in Egypt. Unfortunately, since the temple is not built, we are trying to also keep distance and to ensure that we do not imitate exactly how things were done in the temple, which we're not forced to imitate them exactly. Therefore, we keep only a neck. Chabad custom is to take the neck of a chicken. Chicken was not even off the korban, only to keep away from the real, not to try to substitute it in any way. We need a temple to be there to have the proper korban Pesach, but this is placed on the Pesach Seder plate, as we're going to see in a moment, in order to have that commemoration. So that's something else you want to prepare. In addition to the bitter herbs, to the zroya, the lamb, the shank bone, or the neck of the chicken, you also want to have an egg. an hard-boiled egg. That hard-boiled egg is to remind us yet another offering which was brought in the temple during the holiday of Pesach called the Korban Chagiga, the festival offering, which was mainly used during the first part of the meal at the night of Passover. The Paschal lamb was eaten at the end of the Seder. Only once we discussed and explained everything about Passover, then is when it was brought out just before midnight. But the original meal was also celebrated with the meat of the Chagiga offering, which is represented by the egg. And the reason it's an egg, because not as the Pesach offering, which can only be prepared if it's broiled, roasted, but when it comes the Chagiga offering, you can also eat it cooked or in any other way. So therefore, we use an egg. There is another reason to that egg, because when we start the Seder meal, we obviously remind ourselves that the temple is not with us, that unfortunately people are still suffering, we are in exile, and that is, the egg is a dish usually eaten by a mourner at the first meal after coming back from the funeral of a loved one. So it's a dish of mourners, and that is when throughout the celebration of Pesach, we also want to remember that we are not in complete joy until we're going to merit the ultimate redemption coming by all of us being together with Mashiach Tzidkeinu. So now you have an egg, plus you're going to have a little piece of vegetable called the karpas, which is either a piece of potato or an onion or celery. And that is a vegetable, what its purpose is just to eat it at the beginning of the Seder, to have your children or the people around you wonder, why are we doing it? So that is going to entice them to ask even more questions. And that's how we're going to go into the conversation of the story of the Exodus. In addition, you want to prepare some salt water, because that piece of vegetable is going to be dipped in salt water. So now that we have all those items prepared, you have your matzah, you have your wine, you have your bone for the zroa, you have your egg, you have your bitter herbs, which is either romaine lettuce or grounded horseradish. You have the salt water. You obviously have a proper agada, which you can find everywhere. Today you can download it on your website on chabad.org. You can download a beautiful agada. Now you are ready to start the Seder. So this is how the Seder starts. We're going to first create the plate, and I want you all to follow how this creation of the plate goes. This is a matzah cover, which has 3 compartments, because I'm going to place 3 matzot representing, first of all, the 3 special types and segments of the Jewish people: the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israelite. And this obviously also reminds us, when you see the number 3, our sages tell us this is how we invite our 3 forefathers, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then by the 4 cups, we invite our matriarchs, our mothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. So we have over here 3 compartments. If you don't have, this is the commercial type of matzah cover, you can do it very easy. And I want to tell you that I heard from people who were there that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, actually did have not a commercial type of matzah cover, but he took a napkin tablecloth, and you do it very simply. Imagine this is a tablecloth. Take a napkin tablecloth, you fold it once, and then you fold it again, and at this point, you created 3 compartments, very easy to put in the 3 matzot. And I'm going to explain in a moment why do we need 3. So here I'm going to come up with the matzah. There you go. This is the this is the traditional matzah cover. I'm going to start with 3 matzot, handmade matzah, which are a little type of, look like a receiver, because we want to create a vessel to receive the blessings of tonight. And I'm starting from bottom up. I'm putting 1 matzah for representing the Israelite. On top of it, I put a 2nd matzah for the Levites. And all the way at top, I put the 3rd matzah for the Kohen. So we have Kohen, Levi, Israel, which also the original letters, the initial letters of Kohen, Levi, Israel is Chaf, Lamed, Yud, also representing the word Kli, which means a vessel. Like I mentioned before, we are now forming the vessel for the amazing blessings that is being showered on us and bestowed upon us in tonight, the beautiful Yom Tov of Pesach. The 3 matzahs are here, and I'm going to soon tell you why we have 3. At this point, I'm organizing my Seder plate. And as the plate goes, on the right side first is the neck of the chicken called the zroa, and this is something symbolizing the zroa. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a chicken bone, so I got a little thing which looks like a bone. No meat on it. The furthest to look of the original Korban Pesach. This is being placed on my right, and then I'm looking in the Agada because I want to make sure that I have the instruction properly. I go to the left, and I put the egg, which is for the festival offering, and this is going to be eaten later in the beginning of the meal. So here is my egg right here. I'm actually going to put it into a plate so it shouldn't fall. Very good. Now it's more steady. So I have the zoa, I have the egg. Then in the middle, I put romaine lettuce, which this is going to serve for the mitzvah of eating maror, the bitter herbs, to remind us the bitterness we experienced in Egypt. Then comes on the right side, I have the charoset. The charoset is a dish which is made out of mainly of fruit, apples, pears, dates, and we pour a little wine into it. This is a sweet dish because the bitterness is connected with sweetness. In order to appreciate the sweetness, we have to first go through some bitterness. And in order to realize that the bitterness was never meant to stay bitter, is always combined and mixed together with the sweetness, we are going to dip the maror into the charoset, which also, by the way, looks like mortar, reminding us the difficult task that we had in Egypt is to create and to build structures out of mortar. So we have the charoset. Then on the left side, I'm putting now the vegetable, which is the karpas, a little piece of celery. This is going to be eaten soon at the beginning of the Seder, dipped in salt water. And then I put yet another piece of romaine lettuce for another time that we're going to eat the maror, known as Hillel sandwich, as we're coming soon to. So my dear friends, the plate is ready. Now we can actually start the Seder. And this is the first thing you do when you come home or when you start your Seder in your house, to know that everything I need for the Seder is on the table. But since many of us study Kabbalah and Hasidism, I want you to show you that under my matzah, you see, right here, I have a plate, or what people called a kara. This is which is holding in the bottom of the matzah and the 6 items placed on the table. And the Kabbalah tells us that all this together, we are now unified with the 10 sfirot, the 10 godly emanations, the tools that which God reveals himself and created the world with. This is represented at this very plate, because the 3 matzah that we put is Chachma, Bina, Dat, the 3 intellectual powers. Then we have the 6 items on the table. This is the attributes of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Od Yesod. But where is then the final Malchut, which Malchut usually in Kabbalah means the receiver of all the emanations in order to transmit it to the next world and to the other recipients. This is the plate which is right here under my matzah. You see the plate? This is the kara, which this represents Malchut, and now we are surrounded with all these holy energies ready to start the Seder. And we are starting right now. How does the Seder start? Like every Shabbos, like every holiday, the first thing that we usher in the holiday and the Shabbos is by reciting and making a declaration called Kiddush. Kiddush in Hebrew means holiness, sanctification. This is how we are sanctifying the day by declaring it. This is God's holy day. We gave us the opportunity to share with Him. Every Shabbos starts with, every Yom Tov starts with Kiddush. But tonight, Kiddush is not just a Kiddush. Tonight's Kiddush is one and the first of the 4 cups that I mentioned earlier. Our sages tell us that when God told Moses that he's about to take us out of Egypt, in the second portion in the book of Shemot, of Exodus, Hashem told him, and he used 4 different expressions of redemption. He used the term ve'otzeti, which means in English, I will take you out. Ve'itzalti, I'm going to rescue you. Ve'go'alti, I'm going to redeem you. Ve'lokachti eschem li la'am, I'm going to take you to me as a nation. Those 4 expressions of redemption, each one requires his own cup of wine. And we are celebrating each step. This is not just 4 expressions. This is 4 stages. Many commentators discuss different ideas. The common one, the classic one, known by the Alshich, student of the Ari, says, Ve'otzeti, God took us out of slavery, but still in Egypt. Ve'itzalti, He redeemed us, He rescued us from the land of Egypt. Ve'go'alti, even if you're out of the land, you're still afraid that the Egyptians are chasing after you. The crossing of the sea, we left Egypt and we never saw them again. Then came the 4th, Velokachti, when He gave us the Torah, and He clearly assigned us as His people, as His nation. So those 4 need each on his own blessing, his own cup of wine. I once heard an insight from a great rabbi in Jerusalem, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He said, that's the reason why we do it on wine. Because it's not just a repetition of different expressions. Each language in each segment in the words that got used is to express yet another level, a higher level, stronger experiencing the Geula, the redemption, and that you can experience with wine. Usually when you eat any other food or you drink any type of drink, after the first or second cup, you're getting sick of it, or at least it's not as tasty as the first one or the first 2. But wine, those who drink wine and those who have a taste of wine, they say that the first cup is good, but the second it gets even better. And as more you drink, the cup has a choicier taste. And this is a way of, relating to the expansion of those different levels of redemption, which is the 4 cups of wine. So going back to Kiddush, the Kiddush of Pesach night is not just a Kiddush, it's a Kiddush, which at the same time, we are going to observe the mitzvah of drinking 4 cups. The Kiddush is the first cup of wine, and therefore, tonight, it's not one person making Kiddush for the entire family. Every person who has a Seder, men, women, and children, are going to all celebrate this night by making their own Kiddush, meaning by filling up their own cup of wine. And what cup of wine and how much do you have to drink to make you drink a proper Kiddush cup? So our sages tell us it has to have the amount called revis. To be clear in our language, you want to make sure that your cup has minimum 3.5 ounces. 4 ounces is great. 5 is even better. And therefore, you see, I have a small cup for Kiddush because the halacha wants us to drink up the entire cup, if possible. And when you have a small cup, you can fill it up 3.5 ounces, 4 ounces, and still drink up the whole thing. Remember, you still have a long night with more drinking, and you don't want to fall asleep. So you do it properly. Make sure that you have a cup, not a big cup, so you can drink up the entire cup. If you have a bigger cup, more than 3.5 ounces, so drink at least the majority of the cup, or at least the 3.5 ounces of that cup. But less than that is very questionable if you even fulfill the mitzvah. So you have 3.5 or 4 ounces of wine or grape juice, which is also kosher. Okay? Somebody asked me this yesterday, a diabetic, he can't drink any wine or grape juice. And I told them in Shulchan Aruch, there's actually a section which discusses what is to somebody who can't drink wine. And they offer him the opportunity to drink Chamar Medina, which is a beverage, like a cup of tea or a coffee. It's not the original way of celebrating it, but the Torah and Halacha does offer opportunities for every single Jew to be a part of the Pesach experience, no one to be left behind. So if you need help with that, you contact your local rabbi, and you're going to find a solution. Even for those who can't drink any wine, we'll still have Kiddush and still have the mitzvah of 4 cups. And now, a very important addition. Kiddush, because it's also one of the 4 cups, Pesach is specially required to do it at nighttime. I know that it gets a little late night here, especially in the Northwest, but it's a long day. You can take a rest. So you have the opportunity to start. You can prepare your table plate and everything around before nightfall, but you want to have your first Kiddush cup, which is the first of the 4 cups, especially after nightfall, a little bit around 8:30 on Wednesday night is a perfect time to start your Seder. So you made Kiddush, you fill up the cup, you stand up when you make Kiddush, and you stand by holding it on your right hand. You recite the declaration of Kiddush the way it's in your Agada, concluding with the special blessing of Shechianu, and then you drink the cup sitting wise and leaning towards your left. Leaning on your left represents the way free people are eating and drinking, and that's how we are doing it tonight. We are celebrating our freedom by leaning and acting out as if we are the ones, or the Mishnah, Maimonides record, we are actually the ones who left Egypt. We just went through step 1 of the Seder by drinking the first of the 4 cups. Following that comes an interesting tradition called Hurachatz. We go and we wash our hands, and the washing of our hands is not because we are getting ready for the meal, which is usually when we wash before eating matzah or bread. Rather, over here, the washing of the bread has to do, the washing of the hands has to do because we are going to dip in a vegetable in salt water, in liquid. And in temple times, when the laws of purity and impurity were very strict in order to ensure that you enter to the temple properly, any vegetable which was dipped in liquid was actually required washing prior to it to make sure that our hands are clean. Tonight, we are sympathizing or associating with the way things were done at the original time when we were free, centered around our temple. So we're going to wash our hands before the karpas. And the way you wash your hands is like always, this is a washing cup. And the proper way to wash your hands is you take the right to your left, and then you pour 3 times on each hand, and you don't make no blessing. You just wash, because this is only for to get the curiosity our children going before we continue with the Seder celebration. You washed your hands, got a blessing, you take now the vegetable called the karpas. Karpas is the name for the vegetable, and you are now dipping it in salt water, and you make a blessing on the vegetable, which is the classic the classic blessing, borei pri adama, and the borei pri adama is eaten. You don't have to lean when you eat it, but when you make the adama, you remember there's going to be more vegetables coming on this plate, mainly the maror, the bitter herbs. So keep in mind that this blessing applies also to the vegetable I'm going to eat later. Now, we moved on from Kiddush to washing our hands to Karpas. We are about to start the Agada, to tell the story. When it comes to tell the story, the Torah tells us that we want the story to be told on matzah, over matzah, like the verse actually says, "Ve'gadeta lebincha bayom ahu leimor." You should tell over the story, ba'avur zeh osa Hashem li. Because of this, because of mitzvos, the matzah, the morah, is what Hashem took me out of Egypt, is to celebrate and to remember the commandments He gave us in association with this Yom Tov. So we take matzah, but it's called lechem oni, the bread of poverty. The way we were in Egypt, originally we were poor, we were slaves. A slave, a poor man, doesn't have a whole matzah. He has a piece of matzah. So therefore, before we start the Agada, I'm now taking this middle matzah, which we named them before. Remember, we gave a title, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. The middle matzah is called Levi. I take it and I break it into two parts. One is going to be a little bit less than a half of the matzah, and then the second part is going to be the bigger part, which is a little more than a half. Why two halves? So follow along. You see, I just brought the matzah, and this is the little one. I take it, and I'm going to use it for the final dish at the end of the Seder called the afikoman. As you remember, I said before that during temple times, the last thing which was eaten on the Seder was the Paschal lamb. That was the last thing. There was a dish that we ate after we discussed and we celebrated and we got into the discussion of Pesach. Now let's internalize it. Let's eat it. Let it become a part of us. Today, we don't have the Korban Pesach until the temple is going to be built. So we take a piece of matzah instead, commemorating that Korban Pesach. So that is called the afikoman, which is a language in ancient time used for so-called dessert, the end of the meal. The Kabbalah says that we take the afikoman and we break it into 5 pieces. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. Only 5. We're putting it in a special bag or in a napkin. You see, I have a special afikoman bag. I'm hiding it here, and then I'm going to place it and hide it away between the pillows, just like the Korban Pesach originally was supposed to be guarded from any blemish, and was supposed to eat with sanctity. So too, this is kind of guarded. I'm like putting it away. That's one of the reasons we took the matzah called Levi, because Levi is the grandfather of Moses, who was also hidden before he was born, before he was developed to become the Redeemer. It was actually Levi who was hidden, and that is put aside for later during the meal. So this is put aside, and I have now another piece of matzah, a broken piece, on my Seder plate, which start to tell over this story on that lechem oni, on this bread of poverty. It is also called oni because in oni, the Hebrew word for oni means to respond, to answer. And this story of Pesach, the way our sages introduced this obligation of telling this story, this mitzvah of telling this story, is to say it in a way of question and answer. Children are asking, parents are responding. If there is no, the Mishnah already says, if you don't have children, you ask, the person on your table. If there is no one, you ask, even you repeat a question, and I'm sure our Father in heaven hears our questions very properly. And the way we started is by first, once I broke the matzah, we make a declaration that this is the bread of poverty that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt, and we invite everybody to come join us. My friends, inviting? And a normal Pesach night, it's very difficult to understand. What do you mean you invite? You're sitting on your home and you're inviting, but maybe somebody is standing outside and is going to hear you and come in. But today in curtailing, what does it mean inviting? I believe there are important messages, the messages that we are ready to invite. The act of charity and kindness is one that we carry with us in all situations. And with that merit, we are sure that even Ashato Oche, we are here now, but next year we're going to be in Jerusalem and free men because of this great mitzvah of always caring for the needy and for the poor. So that is the first declaration of the matzah, and then comes the questions of Manishtano, the famous 4 questions that is being asked why we are doing things different tonight than any other night. And once the question was asked, we're going into the Agada. So I want to take a few moments and discuss with you what is the Agada, what is the important part of saying Agada, and at least also to understand how much of it we must say and how much of it is praiseworthy if you say, and so on. The Agada is clearly a biblical commandment that applies to every generation, to each and every one of us, and this is to tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the story of the Exodus from Egypt. You have to tell the story. This is the mitzvah. Now, how do you tell the story? There's so many books. There is Medrash. There is in the 5 books of Moshe, in the Chumash, there is other ways, the way the story is being described. There is stories, the way it's written for kids, the way it's written for adults. There's all kinds of insights into the story. Our just made it easy for us. They composed a proper way of telling the story, and we can rely on their wisdom, their inspiration, their divine inspiration, how the story should be told. The Word Haggadah, which is the name of the book, is actually rooted in the order called V'higad lebincha. You should tell it to your kid. Haggadah comes from the word Higgadah, to say. And the original Haggadah, the text of the Haggadah, is already recorded in the Mishnah. Meaning this is already text which was said during temple times more than 2,000 years ago. We have the recorded version of how the Manishtana and the story of the Haggadah was said. And after the destruction of the temple, there was miniature small changes and additions, and finally, about over 1,200 years ago, it was the great Rabbi Amram Goen in Babylonia, a great sage who composed and organized of the Haggadah the way we have it today, recorded by Rambam, Maimonides, as the full text, exactly text of Haggadah, this book called the Mishnah Torah. Rashi, years ago, records the Haggadah, even on the side, the famous introductions of Kadesh, before Kiddush, Chash, before washing, the 15 mentionings that we have, is all goes back to the original time and passed from generation to generation, all the way to today, how the mitzvah Seder should be celebrated. So this is the way the Haggadah is. So the Haggadah is built in the following structure. The first part of the Haggadah is the Manishtana, is the Kiddush and the question of Manishtana. Then we're introducing different children who are coming to the Seder. Every family has all kids. Every person is also sometimes the wise, sometimes the non-righteous, sometimes the simple, sometimes he acts like he doesn't know how to ask. Or as the Rebbe used to say, sometimes he doesn't even want to come to the Seder. We got to pull him into the Seder, the 5th child. And all the children are coming together, and each one gets his personal attention and respond by the Torah to remember what are we celebrating tonight and how the redemption and the freedom from Egypt is a part of our life, a part of our DNA, and what makes us as a people, and the ability to make choices and right choices and to act with goodness and kindness, all stemming from tonight, the night of the Seder. Many times I mention that one of the great Hasidic rabbis in Israel, the Rebbe of Vishnitz, once said, he loved in Israel, when you ask an Israeli, how are you? How are you doing? What is his response? Akol beseder. Akol beseder literally means everything is all right. But this Hasidic Rebbe, very sensitive, warm heart, he says, oh, wow, look how beautifully they say it. You meet an Israeli and you ask him, how are you? And he says, Hakol. Everything which happens to us, all the good things which will happen in our lives, beseder, all comes from the Seder. The way we are conducting our Seder on the night of Pesach is the source of energy and inspiration for Hakol, for all which is going to befall upon us later throughout the year. So, all of us are coming to the Seder. Then, after you mentioned the 4 sons, comes the text of the Aggadah. The text of the Aggadah is built on a very interesting principle that the Mishnah mentions in Talmud of Psachim. The saying of the Mishnah is, Matchil begnus umesayem beshvach. You start by discussing the challenges, the difficulties, and you end up with the praise and the opportunity that you were granted. And the Talmud goes into a discussion. What difficulties do you start? Do you start with the difficulties of Egypt, according to one opinion, Rav, or Shmuel says, no, we should start with the challenges of the original times, when our forefathers didn't even know that God exists. They were idol worshippers. This is the opinion of Shmuel. And then finally, God took us out of Egypt, and he brought us and he gave us the opportunity to serve him by giving us the Torah, and giving us the temple, etc., etc. Our sages follow this discussion, which obviously the spirit behind this discussion is that in order to appreciate freedom, in order to praise God properly for everything he gave us, you have to first, to appreciate the light, you have to feel a little bit what is it to be in a state of darkness. If it's everything good, glory, at that point you might think that this is how the world is. You don't know any difference. And I don't think that we have to go into any discussions in the present condition that we are here today in the world, all over the world, to understand what does it mean to be born and to live in a time that everything is in a plenitude, or God forbid, in a state when things are very difficult and separated and detached, etc. But in order to appreciate the freedom, we have to first repeat and review and identify with the darkness. So our sages went and joined both of these concepts in the Aggadah. The Aggadah starts with Avodim Ayinu, we were slaves. Vayotzienu Hashem, and God took us out. And then it continues, Mitchila, originally, Oiv de Avodah Zarah, Hoyu Aviseinu. Our forefathers were idol worshippers, they didn't even know about a God. And then he brought us closer. And you go through the history of the Aggadah. Our sages took 4 verses in the book of Dvarim, the book of Deuteronomy, in the parsha called Bikurim. In Kisavai, the Torah tells us when somebody brings his first ripe fruit to the temple, he has to make a declaration of gratitude, of thanking God for what Hashem had given him. That declaration has 4 verses, which our sages find in those 4 verses the entire story from beginning to end, what exactly happened in Egypt, how it happened in Egypt, when did it happen in Egypt, what and how we experienced the exodus from Egypt, all is quoted in those 4 verses in the Parsha of Bikurim in the Deuteronomy. And they expanded on each word of those verses, explaining how those words mean whatever they mean in regard to Egypt. And this is exactly what you actually read in the Agada. It says, Vayered Mitzrayim. In that verse, when we talk about Bikurim, we came down to Egypt. How did we come down? With force. We say a few. How much is a few? 70. The Egyptians had inflicted our life. How did they inflict it? God then punished them. How did he punish them? 10 plagues. So this is how you discuss the actual story through the eyes and the spirit of our holy sages. And that's why I do encourage you to have a proper Haggadah, so you can read to yourself. And it doesn't have to be in Hebrew. If Hebrew is not your language, you can say it in English, in Russian, in French, in Spanish, a way that you can identify with it. When we come to the 10 plagues, finally, we have the tradition of taking the wine and spilling it out a little bit into a cup, because we want to say that those plagues is not something that we want to keep with us out of our cups. And obviously this year we're going to have in mind that all that which needs to be removed and poured out, the corona and so on, should all be removed from us, and then we refill the cup with yain hamesameach, the wine of joy. Then, when you finish reading the story, we discuss again the important mitzvot, which is tonight, known as Rabban Gamliel's statement, explaining why God told us to eat the Paschal sacrifice, why he told us to eat matzah, why he told us to eat the bitter herbs, and you point to each one of them. You point to the matzah, you point to the moror, and you discuss in very brief, beautiful description that you find in the Agada why we're doing these things. And finally, we are about ready to start drinking the second cup. As you remember, there are 2 cups. The first one was for Itzeisi, God took us out of Egypt. Now is the Goalti, he redeemed us. And before we drink the second cup, we recite a first part of the beautiful prayer called the Hallel, which we sing on every holiday. That prayer we also sing in our homes, Pesach night, divided into 2 parts. We're going to sing part of it on the second cup, and the final part of it over the 4th cup. So you fill up your second cup, you say the first 2 praises and chapters of Hallel, and then you recite a special blessing called the blessing of redemption. My friend, it's a beautiful blessing, a blessing that talks about God redeeming us, asher golanu vegolas haviseinu, and at the same time, we also say, Kein Hashem Elokeinu, so God, Yagienu lemoyadim. You see, you're celebrating Pesach now, you are being blessed by God to celebrate Pesach plus many other holidays in the future. Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, Goal Israel. One of the great Turkish sages called Reb Chaim Palagi, he writes in one of he wrote many books. He writes in one of his books, the Mashiach is going to come. We're going to make Kiddush. And Kiddush is going to be by reciting this blessing, the blessing of Geula, Baruch Atah Hashem, Goal Yisrael. Let's up see it speedily. So this blessing is now recited. Your cup is full. Again, you make another time, Baruch Atah Hashem, Borei Pri Gefen, even though you already made a Gefen on the first cup. But tonight, every cup is its own mitzvah. Every cup has its own declarations and his own recitations. The first cup was Kiddush. That was mitzvah number 1. Now comes mitzvah number 2, which is the second cup, with the saying of the Agada over that cup. And you drink it, again, leaning on your left. Make sure that you drink it leaning, because according to Jewish law, the second cup was not drank leaning. You're going to have to fill up another cup and drink it again without a blessing, but you're going to have to drink it again. So make sure that you lean. My friends, we just finished almost a third of the Seder. The first third, which is the 2 cups, Kiddush and the Agada, the story of the Exodus, the discussion of how God redeemed us then and granted us the power of freedom all the way till today. Now that we finished, we are going to go to the second biblical mitzvah of today, and this is the matzah. Matzah is essentially flour and water, unleavened bread, but it's bread. So before we eat bread, we wash now like we wash always before we eat bread. Again, like I showed you before, 3 times on each hand. This time with the blessing, Asher Kiddushan, God commanded us with the mitzvah Netilas Yadayim, and this is to wash our hands. You wash your hands and you're ready for eating the matzah. Let's now go back to the 3 matzahs that we have over here in our Seder plate. I never explained yet why 3, but now is the opportunity to say it. Every Shabbos, every Yom Tov, we are starting our meal by eating bread or challah, by reciting the blessing of a motzi over 2 loaves of challah. And the reason is because on Shabbos and Yom Tov, when we were in the desert and God showered us with man, He gave us the heavenly food in manna, Shabbat and Yom Tov, we did not receive any man. What did we eat? Friday, we were given a double portion for Friday and for Shabbos. To commemorate that experience of being granted a double portion in honor of Shabbos, our sages instituted that every Shabbat meal and every Yom Tov should be over 2 loaves of challah. So tonight, Pesach is Yom Tov. So when we are going to start our meal, we need to have 2 matzah. The 2 loaves are usually required to be all ones. Here too, remember we have a broken piece, but we have 2 other ones. The upper matzah and the bottom matzah, the Kohen and the Yisrael, they represent the Lechem Mishnah, the double loaf of bread that we are to celebrate every Yom Tov and every Shabbos. In addition to that, tonight, we're not just eating bread because that is the way you honor the holiday by starting with bread, or on Pesach, which is not bread, obviously, you're starting the meal by eating matzah. Tonight, we have a biblical mitzvah, which is perhaps, according to the Chassam Sofer, the one left only mitzvah that we can still experience with no temple, but a mitzvah which is associated with eating. And this is the mitzvah of eating matzah, alachilas matzah. So before we are fulfilling the mitzvah, like every mitzvah, prior to the mitzvah, we make a bracha, we make a blessing. The blessing of the matzah is starting with the generic introduction to every blessing over a mitzvah. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshonu b'mitzvayso v'tzivanu. You had sanctified us with your commandments, and you commanded us al achilas matzah, for the mitzvah of eating matzah. But so we have 2 blessings. You're first going to make a motzi lechem in haaretz, which is the blessing assigned for flour and water coming together, usually leavened bread, or on Pesach night, the unleavened bread. That's the amotzi blessing. But then you're making a second blessing specifically for the mitzvah of matzah, and this is asher kiddushono b'mitzvayso al achilas matzah, for the mitzvah of eating matzah. And then here comes the interesting discussion. In halacha, in Jewish law, the discussion is which part of the matzah should you eat in order to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah. Talking specifically, the person who leads the Seder. I have matzah that I broke before, and I said the agada over that broken piece, the lechem oni. So this is matzah, which I said a lot of good stuff over it. This is that broken piece, which is hidden between the 2. And then I have the upper part, which I made the amotzi on. So is the mitzvah of eating matzah should be from the upper part or from the middle part? It was undecided. It got into a big discussion. So you know what I'll say? Just tell us. typical. Eat a piece of matzah from the upper part, and yet another piece of matzah from the middle. Eat both of them. And that's, you ensure that you fulfilled, either way, you fulfill the obligation. So the one who leads the Seder, he has the matzah plate in front of him, is actually going to take a piece, and a piece, I don't mean a small piece. In Jewish law, whenever we are required to eat, the requirement is to eat a kazait. Kazait is a volume weight. It's not something I can measure because there are smaller matzah and larger matzah. But if you have a typical shmura matzah, a little less than a half of that is what everybody around the table should eat to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah at first. So the one who leads the Seder is actually going to eat a little less than a half of the upper part, plus the little less than a half of the second matzah, which he said they are God over it. But each one needs to eat that matzah, and this matzah is also eaten leaning on your left. And if you did not lean, you did not show yourself completely free, you're going to have to re-eat another piece of matzah. Again, make sure that you do it right. The matzah is a holy dish. In the Holy Zohar, the matzah is referred to as michla de me'emnusa. This is bread which is actually sustaining our faith, our emunah, our belief in God is being strengthened by eating the matzah. The matzah itself is an ingredient of emunah. First of all, celebrating the emunah that we had, the Jewish people had, following God into the desert out of Egypt, not knowing where we're going, how we're going, without having even our food ready with us. And emunah in general, believe in Almighty God for everything that He's providing for us, and we belong to Him, and He cares for us, and we are one with Him, and He is the one and only. This emunah is being strengthened and fed and nourished by matzah. In addition, especially in this year, it's very important to mention that the Holy Zohar also calls the matzah michle de asvusa. It's bread of healing. It's medicine. Somebody who came into a Seder, and he came from the former Soviet Union, and he never saw Pesach, and he knew that a dinner requires vodka. So he said, Rabbi, we're not going to have any vodka today. I said, my friend, matzah is called bread of healing. You are taking medicine. Doctor says, when you take medicine, you don't drink alcohol. The idea is that this is healing. It heals physically, it will heal spiritually. And I'm sure that on this year Pesach, we're going to remind all those who need physical healing, specifically to the latest disease in the entire world, all going to unite with them. But matzah gives us that strength. Matzah is the original. This is water and flour going back to the original type of food, to the original story of the Exodus. We're all going back to our original state of mind, of our connection and relationship with God. So now you fulfilled a mitzvah called matzah. After you ate the matzah, you have another mitzvah, and this we eat tomorrow. The Torah, and the first time we did Pesach in Egypt, the Torah told us that I want you to eat matzah and moroi, bitter herbs, to remember the bitterness. Obviously also in order to appreciate the Exodus and the redemption and the freedom, it has to start with first how bitter it was. And this is what our sages instituted, even when there is no Paschal lamb, to eat something which is bitter. And this is the romaine lettuce, which also needs to have a certain size. If you have a big leaf, that's enough. If you have smaller, so I take at least 3 of those, or 5 of smaller ones. Is a custom, but the Chabad custom is also to put the main lettuce, horseradish, and you join them together, and then you dip it into the charoset, and you make a blessing. Al asher kiddushanu, again, it's a mitzvah. So God, you sanctified us with the commandments, and you commanded us of the mitzvah to eat maror. Obviously, it's bitter, so you're not going to lean like a free man and at the same time feel like I'm a slave. I'm bitter. So that is eaten without leaning, but you are eating it as a part of tonight's experience to remember the maror, the bitterness that that Egypt gave us until finally God redeemed us. You finish the matzah, you finish the maror. At this point, we're going again back to temple times. In temple times, the way the Paschal sacrifice was eaten was like a sandwich. It was matzah. Inside, between two pieces of matzah, there was the maror and the Paschal sacrifice. And Hillel, the great sage Hillel, is the one who had showed how this mitzvah is to be properly observed by eating the matzah and the maror together. So therefore, tonight, since we don't have the Paschal lamb, but we do have matzah and we do have maror, so even we ate matzah first separately for the mitzvah of eating matzah, and we ate maror separately for the mitzvah of eating maror. We are also doing something called curtailing. We are joining and combining the two of them, the maror and the matzah together, and eat it, also leaning to commemorate the way on temple times the matzah was eaten together with the maror during the eating of the Korban Pesach. My friends, by eating these three items, you just fulfilled amazing mitzvah of matzah, the amazing mitzvah of maror, and you know what? We are ready for dinner. Shulchan Aruch. And you obviously it's a Yom Tov, so you can remove everything on the side, and you see that you bring out from the delicacies that you prepared for yourself in your house, and you eat a proper dinner to show your honor and respect for Yom Tov. We finished dinner. We are going for dessert. Tonight's dessert is not ice cream. Tonight's dessert is not going to be applesauce. That can be a pre-dessert dessert. The real dessert is going to be what we ate for dessert in temple times. And that was the Paschal lamb. If we don't have a temple, we are going to eat a piece of matzah. And that matzah is from the matzah that you have placed before between the pillows, the hidden matzah, and you uncover it by introducing it now as a zeicher for the afikoman, as commemorating the afikoman, again, eating it, leaning on your left. And just like in temple times, after the Paschal lamb was eaten, nothing else was eaten after that. There is no matzah after it. There is no food after that. This is going to be the last piece of food that is going to stay with us in our mouth as a taste of matzah, a taste of freedom, a taste of the Korban Pesach, of the miracle of passing over our homes in rescuing our lives until later next morning. This is the final dish. You finish the afikoman, and everybody is having a piece of afikoman, a piece of matzah. And by the way, I forgot to mention that the koirach, the matzah that you use for the sandwich, so here is when you're going to use the third you had in your matzah plate. So now, the top matzah is used for the amotzi, the middle matzah was used for the mitzvah of eating matzah, and the third matzah was used for the mitzvah of afikoman, and that's how all of them came to good use. But remember before, they were all wrapped into one cover, the Kohen, the Levi, the Yisrael, all Jews essentially unified together as a force of unity with one cloth covering us all. Now we finished the meal. I believe that we ate perfectly good, and we are good to go to the second part of the Seder. The second part of the Seder is first following with the third of the 4 cups. And like I said before, There's a mitzvah to drink 4 cups, but there's also a mitzvah to recite something over each of the 4 cups that we drink. So the first cup, we said what? Kiddush. The second cup we drank and we said over it what? The Agada. What are we going to say now in the third cup? After you already say the Agada, you ate a meal. A meal of matzah requires the blessing after meal, called grace after meal, Birkas Hamazon, benching. We are now going to bench, but not just benching, we're going to bench over a third cup. The third cup of wine is going to carry in it the blessing of grace after meal with all the beautiful ideas it contains, the blessing for the food, the blessing for the land of Israel, composed by King Solomon, the blessing of Jerusalem by King David, and thanking God for all the wonderful things he gave us. This is all a part of the benching, which is also in your Agada, by now reciting it over the third cup that we are drinking of the 4 cups. You bench, again you make a special boire priya gofen, thanking God for a blessing over wine, even though you already made once before and twice before. It's a third cup. It carries his own bracha. This is a mitzvah for his own, and you make a gofen, you drink it again, leaning on your left. Now that you drank 3 cups, comes a very special moment in the Seder. And this is when we fill up a special cup. You see, this cup is a special cup designated for Eliyahu Navi, for Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet is the one that the Torah tells us is, we anticipate him to come and broadcast the great news that Mashiach came. He is the Mevaser HaGeula. As the prophet Malachi says, Hine anochi shaleach lochem es Eliyahu Navi. I'm sending you Elijah the prophet, Lifnei bo yoim Hashem, before the big day arrives. So before we're starting what he is going to introduce to us, the great news is Eliyahu Navi. We are filling it up with wine with the belief that he comes to our Seder and visits and is witnessing the fact that despite all what we are going through, and despite that we have no temple for so many thousands of years, we still keep our traditions, we keep ourselves together. We are home, sometimes even alone, but with the emunah, with the belief that Hashem is with us. We are doing the Seder. We're reminding ourselves who we are and that we are really people who belong. And that, when Eliyahu Navi sees it, he is informing the one in charge, Almighty God, the time of the redemption has arrived. We open the door. We welcome him with a special prayer of Shvei Chamascha. And I want to tell you what the Rebbe writes in his Agada. The Rebbe wrote one of his first books, was a commentary on the Agada in the early 1940s. And he records there certain beautiful sayings that different Rebbes told each other during Pesach. And he says that the previous Rebbe was told when he was a child by his father, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Reb Sholem Ber, that during the Seder night, he told him by his name, Yosef Yitzchak was his name, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. He says, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, that during the Seder, you got to think and keep in mind to be a mensch, to be a proper, decent person, a decent person. We all know what a mensch means. Especially, he says, you should bear it in mind when you open the door for Eliyahu Navi. And he says then 2 very important words. Nish bet gashmias, bet ruchnias. Don't waste this opportunity for asking only for physical gains. Ask God to bless you with a spiritual appreciation, with an appreciation to spirituality. Ask for spiritual needs. And that's what he told him, and the Rebbe writes it in the beginning of the Agada. And I remember at home when he was a child, every year on Pesach, before the Seder started, my father used to open up the Agada, and we were a bunch of kids, sitting around the table, and he read, and he made sure everybody listens, and he said, Yosef Yitzchak, that was the name of the previous Rebbe, mit darf trachten, b'meshach ha-seder auf seiner Mensch. Think about being a mensch, a decent person, vet the Rebbe helfen. If you think about being a mensch, God is for sure going to help. Befrat, especially be'ez psichas adeles, when the door is opened up for Elijah. Need bet gashmias. Don't ask for physical, bet ruchnias. But obviously, I would suggest, if I'm allowed, that when we ask today's day for gashmias, for the health of our world, for the healing of our people, and for the entire world, it's also ruchnias. Obviously, when we are able to be physically together, this is our spiritual life. Then we can meet each other in shul again. We can go to minyan again. We can open up our synagogues, our mikvahs. There's so much ruchnias depending on gashmias. There's so much spirituality which depends on our physical gifts. The economy should be healed so people can give tzedakah and help each other out. So obviously, this is the type of gashmias which I believe is okay, and it's kosher to ask, and we should take this opportunity wherever you are, Pesach, and it comes at that moment to heavens for a big bracha for our physical and spiritual needs. Then we're going now to the final stage of the Seder. The final stage of the Seder is not only relating the past, reflecting on the past, the Exodus, the enslavement before the Exodus, the bitterness, the redemption, this whole paradox playing with us throughout this evening of matzah, which is freedom, matzah, which is bread of poverty. Now we're getting into a final stage, concentrating more about the connection with God and the anticipation for the future, the Geula. And that last part, the more spiritual part of the Seder, is called Hallel. We fill up the fourth cup and we finish up all the chapters of Hallel that we did not say in the beginning. It's the only time a year, by the way, that we say Hallel at night. Every Yom Tov, Hanukkah, Sukkot, Shavuos, we only say it during the day. Tonight, the night is almost like a day, not almost. Laila kayom yor, it's really a shining night. It's a beautiful night. It's light out there. It's morning. And we say Hallel, sitting at home, taking the Sagada, and over the fourth cup, we say Hallel, and the complete Hallel all the way to the Nishmas, the way we express how much our soul is happy and excited to thank God for all that what He did to us. And we say Ishtabach, and we praise God, and then we finish praising Him again by drinking the fourth cup, making again a Boire Priya Gofen, a special blessing of the fourth cup of wine, and on the left, we are drinking up the fourth cup, and by this moment, we actually completed the traditional, powerful Seder, each and every one, wherever he is. And like I said in the beginning, this year, and the reason for this class being a class over Zoom is because unfortunately, the way it stands now, many of us, which are either at family seders, with having usually the so-called the macher of the, in every family there's a macher who knows how to organize and how to relate because he remembers the seder from before. There are going to be seders with no macher. You're going to become your own macher. Each one is making his own seder. And the seder is something that we should do and realize that we are not alone and people did the seder in every situation. And I want to share with you something personal, 2 personal stories. And with this, I'm going to finish tonight's presentation. Number 1, when I was a child, at our Seder at home, many years we used to go to my father's parents, and then they came to us. Till after my bar mitzvah, which I spent most of the years having the Seder in the yeshiva in New York next to the Rebbe. But I remember every year Pesach, during the Seder, my grandmother, Alea Shalom, used to recall and repeat her Seder night in Auschwitz. In Auschwitz in 1944, she was a young lady, 18-year-old girl, separated from her family, from her sisters, from her parents, and she was now spending Pesach in a bunk with girls. Happens to be she grew up, my Rabbi Farkash grew up in a village. She was the only Jewish family in the village, so her father learned with her a lot. So she knew a lot of prayers and teachings by heart. So she was sitting with a bunk at night, the night of Pesach. They still kept a little calendar. And she always recalled that I was leading the Seder, my grandmother. I read the Agada. And always, every year, she said the same thing. There was no cups of wine, but there was a lot of tears. Nothing else was on the Seder plate. There was no matzah. There was one item that we did not lack, and this is the morer. Not referring to the physical lettuce or horseradish, but the bitterness that we all had while being here isolated in this frightening state of Auschwitz, 1944. And as kids, we used to look at that with open eyes and wanting to hear, like, you know, so how was it? And we were like identifying with the fright of being a girl alone with other parents. But as I'm getting older, and I learned, she did a Seder in Auschwitz. It's not about the fright and the fear. Girls were in Auschwitz, but yet in the most difficult state of mind and physical stage, did celebrate Pesach, sitting there and quietly reciting the Agada, Ve'isha Amdala Viseinu, Shelo Yechad Bilvad, not only one tried to get rid of us, V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Matzileinu Miyadam, and God rescued us from their hands, saying, Hoidel Hashem Kitayv, thank you, God, for all the goodness that you provided us, was said in this difficult stage in the darkness of Auschwitz. This is one experience. But yet I want to tell you another experience. Talking about, especially to my dear friends, who for many years are doing the Seder together and might have to be this year, each one in their own home, and some of them with no family. 1988, our dear Rebbe, Lubavitch Rebbe, lost his wife. That was in the month of Shvat, just about little less than 2 months before Pesach. The Rebbe's wife, for over 50 years, had passed away. And when close to 60 years, and she passed away, and the Rebbe was at home during the Shiva, and he stayed home till Pesach. Just Erev Pesach, the eve of Pesach, the Rebbe came back to be in the synagogue in his office in 770 Eastern Parkway, where he came to be Pesach with Hasidim. But the Hasidim, each one had a home. They went home to their families. The yeshiva students had which I participated, at our yeshiva Seder. 500 yeshiva boys were eating together, 400 yeshiva boys were eating together on 1414 President Street. And in the middle of that Seder, as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking the Rebbe is there by himself making a Seder, but at some point he's going to go out to open the door, to meet Elijah the prophet. And I felt I'm going to have an opportunity to see the Rebbe tonight. I didn't tell it to anyone, but I went over to 770, and I will remember like today, the door opened up, the side door, which originally was used in the later years for the car to drive up the Rebbe to the office and to the synagogue. And the Rebbe opened this door and he stood there all alone with a Passover Haggadah, looking up to the sky just before reciting the special prayer that you say when you open the door for Elijah the prophet. And it was a very special moment, you know. The Rebbe is obviously carrying on him the needs and the blessings for the entire Jewish people and for the entire world. But he gave, and I'm thinking now that the Rebbe was alone. He was conducting a Seder. He could have come to the yeshiva with all his students who will do everything they can to have the Rebbe meet us Seder night. The Rebbe could have, every family would have loved to have him. But he was conducting a Seder to himself, and he wasn't himself. I'm sure he wasn't himself. We were all there together. And this memory is what inspires and hopefully can inspire those who are going to be alone, even with our family, to remember that the great tzaddikim, leaders of generations, which have thousands and hundreds of thousands of followers, had some years that they did Pesach alone, but they were not alone. A Jew is never alone. At the end of the Seder, after we finish the 4 cups, we take Elijah's cup and we refill it to the bottle and we make a declaration. And let us all say together, Leshana Abba B'Yerushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem. You know, the Rebbe often said, it doesn't mean that we're going to have to wait till next year to be in Jerusalem. Mashiach comes now. So obviously by next year, we're all going to be together in Yerushalayim. So with this, I'm going to conclude. I hope that we went through the steps of the Seder. First of all, practically to know what we do, how we do, so you can now watch it again or go over your Agada, so you're going to see that everything I told you is actually printed as instructions in your Agada. So you should be very comfortable. Don't get intimidated. You're not vulnerable. You have a Agada with you. Make sure you have matzah. You got a bottle of grape juice, a bottle of wine, and the rest of the dishes. And when you sit down there, we are going to have the great visitors, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and all the great neshamas are going to be there. We're all going to be there with you. We are all together with it. We are all in our own homes. We would love to be, obviously, in our public Zdorim, in community and family Seders, but we are all going to be together as one people, and I'm sure that it's very, very, very possible, and it will be that God should help us that by Pesach, miraculously, we should all be together. And if naturally we're still here, remember, Hashem is with you, Hashem is with us. Leshana Abba B'Yerushalayim. Come on, join. Leshana Abba B'Yerushalayim. 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 Shine, shine, shine B'Yerushalayim. Habnu Yol Chaim. Okay, I don't know how to unmute, but if you want to ask any questions, I will take some questions now. Anybody wants to ask a question? You have to unmute yourself.
Why do you break the afikoman into 5 parts?
This is a Kabbalistic concept which has to do that the power of severity, Gvura, has 5 elements to it. So since we are now we are practicing an act of breaking, so this is associated with severity. Severity is divided into 5, as the Kabbalah calls it, a Gvuros. Hey means 5 Gvuros. Any other questions?
Rabbi,
Yes.
is it Kiddush Levanah? It's okay to say tonight?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Not Kiddush on wine, but Kiddush Levana, the sanctification of the moon, it's okay to say tonight, not a problem.
Okay.
Any other questions? Everybody's good? What time is now? Oh, it's late already. Okay, my friends.
Yeah. לילה טוב.
Keep strong. Good night, everybody. להתראות. חג שמח.
חג שמח, תודה רבה.
תזכו לשנים רבות.
Amen. Amen. We should see each other physically.
אמן, אמן.